Time, of course, has reduced just by 3 days. So this is one of the major challenges. So what is the solution? Next, please. Solution is that Chinese industry should base itself in Xinjiang province. And until and unless they do that, and Kashgar should be taken as a base for all logistic movements, only then it is somewhat financially viable, and time-wise, if you see, it is drastically reduced. Now, we cannot go for any business deal when it is to be brought from Shanghai or Hong Kong or Guangzhou all the way to Kashgar. What Chinese government has done at the moment is that they have declared Kashgar as special economic zone. And when we discuss with them the prospects of Kashgar, they say that it would be the responsibility of Chinese government and traders to bring products to Kashgar special economic zone. And Pakistani trader or rest of the world has to start off from Kashgar to Gwadar and rest of the world. If this happens, which will take time, this is again a question that how much time it will take, because at the moment, industry and other infrastructure is totally laid down towards the east and the center. Nothing in Xinjiang province. So we have to wait for that. And then, as I mentioned, Kashgar has to be linked via road, which is already there, pipelines, rail, and then we have to construct logistic parks en route for value addition, for warehousing, for rest and recreation, all those things. Next, please. Now, this is the last part of my presentation. What needs to be done? There should be a centralized body to address all these issues. We have forwarded this recommendation to the government also because everyone is working in isolation. There has to be one window operation. Only then we all can know what is going on, what is to be done, who is to be connected, contacted, and what are the policies. So there is a requirement of one centralized body. We should establish joint forum to address multiple issues resulting from international trade environment. It doesn't need any explanation. Reforms in logistics and transport sector, I mentioned earlier. Transport fleets comprising TIR-compliant vehicles should be brought into Pakistan. Then coordinate the layout of intra-provincial connectivity. The trade corridors, the western route, the central route, the eastern route, we have heard a lot about that. But there is a requirement of connecting these routes within the provinces. That is lateral linking. If you see, these three routes are the vertical linking. We need to have lateral linking with these main corridors. Upgradation of railways, I mentioned earlier. Effective layout of security apparatus, again, mentioned earlier. Next, please. We have to enter into joint ventures with Chinese companies and other international players. We cannot work in isolation. We have to do that. So please be in time. This is the time where we should be working on these things, interacting with other companies, with other stakeholders, other players, and going into joint ventures. Competitive environment. This is very important. If we remain restricted to ourselves and do not see the globe, where it is going, as Doctor mentioned about the future. So we should be knowing about the future so that we are competitive. Multi-purpose warehouses, that is cold chain, perishables, non-perishables, every type of warehouse, we have to do that. Establishment of logistic, commercial, and science and technology parks. This is very important, gentlemen. And this is for the business community, that they should select the places, they should start planning, they should work for it, and then establish the logistic park, because it takes a lot of time to go through this. And this is what Chinese are doing. They are constructing logistic parks, they are constructing economic zones and industrial zones in almost all major cities. And it is from there they will start off with CPAC business. Development of industrial commission zone, well-coordinated center, yes. Now, you must have read in the newspapers that every province has announced its own industrial parks and economic zones. There is a requirement to put together this because it cannot work at provincial level. There should be a centralized body which should decide where an economic zone or industrial zone or a logistic park is to be established and what all it should contain. There should not be duplication of effort and wastage of effort. Awareness programs on the benefits and effects of CPAC. It should include the economical program, the social effects, the cultural effects, and of course, the environmental effects of all this process, which should be known to general public to allay their fears about CPAC. Next, please. This is my organization, National Logistics Cell, as we are working in the freight services, and here I would apprise you that to improve upon the transport sector, we are going for a truck assembly plant in Karachi, inshallah, with MA in Germany. So it is just because of CPAC that we're going for this assembly plant here in Karachi. Construction, we are going for the construction of roads, bridges, and other infrastructure. Border terminals and dry ports. At the moment, Torkham, Chaman, and Vaga, these are managed by NLC. We are going for Sust and Taftan to manage border control terminals and dry ports over there. Drivers emergency and rest area. It would be called as DERA. It is basically the rest area for the truck drivers. And of course, the general public also, other people can also use that. And these are laid out all along the three routes, the western route, the central route, and the eastern route. We have planned it with the help of NHA, and inshallah, soon we will be launching this project. Freight train operations, we have our own locomotives. Tracking and monitoring, again, we are working into this. Gentlemen, I end my presentation with just one comment. Next, please. Patience is not about doing nothing. Patience is about constantly doing everything you can, but being patient about the results. So I expect that we wait for the results. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brigadier Syed Kausar Hussain Saab. In today's day and age, stakeholders are looking at us, looking at businesses through a different lens. And to discuss and deliberate on the role of a CFO in today's contemporary world, where performance matrices are changing. How can CFO act as a chief sustainable officer and help take business to a different level? To do this discussion, we have our esteemed panel, and I'm going to request them, who's going to be moderated by Humayun Bashir. Humayun Saab has been the ex-CEO of IBM and is an advisor and the board member on the Startup Advisory Board. The panelists are going to comprise of Mr. Hanif Idris, who's the CFO and Company Secretary, DHL Pakistan, Bruce Garrett, who's the MD, Marsh, Mr. Helmut, who's the Managing Director of Siemens Pakistan, and Rashid Masood Alam, who's the Financial Controller. So can we have a round of applause to welcome these esteemed panelists to have this discussion? If I can request Humayun Saab to lead the discussion.
From Nadeem Saab, very eloquently put together the entire agenda and the objectives of the program. Initially we heard from Khurram, who set the stage for the day's session. I have the pleasure of moderating this session. I have experts with me, The beauty is that we have 2 chief executives and 2 CFOs to deliberate on the subject. If we look at what is happening around us, the disruptive changes, the economic changes, the opportunities, and we look at our role. What is the role of the CFO today? What was the role of the CFO 5, 10, 15 years ago? And what is expected in the next decade? I think by the end of this session, you should have, with the help of the expert panel here, a better insight of what is needed. Now, in terms of changes that are coming, CFOs need to embrace a long-term view. They need to be the integrator. In the past, they were more about, in 10, 15 years ago, about bookkeeping, about accounting, about forecasting. In the present days, most CFOs here, and I see a lot of younger lot in their 30s here who have a good runway of 20, 30 years ahead, inshallah, and they will see lots of changes and lot of disruptive actions around them. We have seen many of these mentioned in Jose's presentation, in Nadeem Saab's introduction, as well as you are facing it yourself. I mean, the telecom companies are losing revenue to WhatsApp. Their SMS revenue is gone. The banking companies are losing their business, the remittance and mobile payment businesses to the telecom companies. So adjacent industries are coming in. So the CFO of the future has to step out of a simple role of being an accountant or supporting the chief executive. He has to be the chief sustainability or chief performance officer, and he has an external role as well to manage the metrics and the stakeholders, external, to have a communication capability, and to keep an eye on the competition and keep an eye on the challenges that are there. So let me not do all the talking. Let me refer to the help of some of the experts here. And may I start with Bruce? I had the pleasure of interacting with all the 4 participants over the last 3 days. We spent 10, 15 minutes on phone, exchanging notes, etc., so that we are on a common wavelength. So, Bruce, can you walk us through your views? You have spent a lot of time in Pakistan and Dubai and other places. How do you see the role of a CFO changing the coming 10 years, and what do these young people need to prepare for?
Well, I think my overview is going to be from a relatively simplistic perspective. I think that we, in whatever industry we work, are faced now with challenges, many of which we haven't anticipated. The competitive environment, it doesn't matter which business you're in a very competitive environment. And from a CFO's perspective, I think, somebody as old as I has always been slightly pejorative about the accountants and the finance function. It's been about producing financial data, making sure that the reporting has been done correctly and accurately, and avoiding too many nasty questions being asked. And it's very clear to me, because I discussed with Humayun last night, we are both grandfathers. And so we understand the challenges of having significantly younger children who are pushing the boundaries in every possible direction. And they are much more concerned about sustainability than our generation. I can just give you a little anecdote. This morning I received from my youngest daughter-in-law a whole lot of information about her concerns about the sustainable world in which she is now living. And it was very interesting to read an article when I was able to access the internet, so we may be going to, Jose, make a lot of progress very quickly, but you can't always access the internet even when you know that you have got free access. But when I was able to access the internet, the message that came through was that Unilever have been looking at changing the products that they have been selling and making them more sustainable. And actually it was fantastic to read that they reckon that for the sustainable products that they make, and they advertise them as sustainable, they've actually seen growth in their numbers in 2015 of 30%. So, what are the challenges for a CFO? First of all, you've got to be good at doing what I would call the basic job. But actually, as the CFO, you're probably not going to be doing so much of the number crunching as you might have been used to doing in the past. What you've got to be able to do, I think, is to look inside your business. You've got to have very good skills at networking and getting on well with the drivers of the different business units if you're in a multifaceted organization. So you've got to understand, know, appreciate, and really have the respect of your colleagues. So that's a job internally. You've got to be motivating the younger people who are working for you. You've got to keep them motivated, because the biggest challenge in the world today is that as soon as anybody comes out of a university with a degree or a doctorate or an MBA, they want to be the CEO. And realistically, you can't get to that sort of position until you've had just a little bit more of what one might describe as real commercial experience. Because being out there in the real world, rather than being in the academic and student world, is a very different experience. So you've got to be a multifaceted and a multi-skilled person. You cannot just be, a one-size-fits-all person. And so I think that the challenges are enormous. It's going to require significantly broader vision, both inside the company and also outside the company. It's going to be requiring significant networking skills. It's going to require significant interpersonal skills as well. And of course, a very large brain. I have a very small brain, so it's nice and easy. I don't stretch myself too hard. Those are my initial thoughts.
Great, lovely. So, multifaceted skills, networking, communication skills. Some of these skills are not that easy to gather, and usually are not as part of the roadmap of a chartered accountant or a entry-level CFO in the initial years. But as we go along, these will become more and more important, how we put it all together. So, as Nadeem Saab said it, we need to, our CFOs need to future-proof the organization. Let me turn to a CFO, very, very experienced person sitting next to me, Mr. Idris Saab, and get his views on the subject. From a CFO perspective, how does he see the role of the CFO evolving?
Thank you, Maisab. If you see the role of CFO, you have to see how it is transformed. In 1960s and 70s, it was purely a bookkeeping role, number crunching. And gradually, what events happened internationally, first of all, globalization. Globalization brought it with itself a lot of challenges. The global initiatives have to be successful. And we have seen that CFOs have played a very important role in making those global initiatives successful. I will give you an example of Starbucks. Starbucks, when it started, it had less than 200 stores in 1992. In 2013, it had more than 19,000 stores. And if you see the story of Starbucks, the key role was played by their CFO. So first thing was the globalization, which really impacted a lot on the CFO's role. The second thing which happened was the rapid technological progress, especially the information technology. A lot of information is available, and every time the scenarios are changing. There are more choices for the customers, there are more choices for your employees. So attracting and retaining the talent became very important. Attracting and retaining your customers became very important. And the CEOs and the business heads are always faced with the problem that how to assess the opportunities. And CFO has to come there And he had to assist the CEOs, not with the historical information, but with the futuristic information. So that became very important, because whatever is done, that is history. So accountant had to come out of his role of historian and more of future teller. Another thing which happened is the economic situation, world order. You can see we saw polarization. We are experiencing Brexit. The oil prices we have seen. Those businesses which were planning or which were forecasting that there will be an entry barrier because of the high oil prices, the transportation cost has gone down and the access has become easier. Another thing which happened, if you see the events of 2001 to 2010, what has happened is that there was an old saying that turnover is vanity and profit is sanity. That old saying was abundant, and there was a lot of desire for growth and inflating the bottom lines. And in that desire, we saw that there were a lot of undesirable practices, off-balance sheet liabilities, leading to high-profile corporate scandals. And that was a backlash on the role of the accountants. And I think so CFOs in the last few years have been spending their time in repairing that damage. Okay, so that was a sort of, I see that as a role, as an impediment in the growth role which CFOs were embarking upon. And I think so we have come over that now. The regulatory framework has become very stringent. So CFOs have to be very cognizant with the business. They have to come out of the back role, behind the numbers. They have to come on the front. And front to such an extent that they have to interact with the customers. They need to see what is required for the business. Because if you analyze the role of CFOs, I see there are 4 key roles. One is the stewardship, one is the operator, and one is the strategist, and fourth is the catalyst. So in the current era, I think so CFOs are focusing more on being a strategist or catalyst. And when we say strategist, they have to bring financial leadership to align the financial strategies with the business strategy. And as a catalyst, they have to be a preacher, a promoter within the organization. And for that, they need strong negotiation skills. They need strong communication skills within the organization and outside the organization. So they have to keep their ears on the ground, very close to the business, and not in the back office, busy with the numbers. The technological progress has helped a lot. That a lot of mundane tasks of the accountants has been taken over by ERPs and the systems. So this is my views on that.
Great. So basically, to sum it up, some space has been created with the automation and the technologies and the ERPs, and with the handling of the issues that were in the last decade. So there are better systems in place today, better controls and better processes. And the CFO is required now to step out of his comfort zone and address the catalyst and the change maker role that is required. So let me turn to another chief executive, Helmut from Siemens. Siemens has been operating in Pakistan for decades now, and I'd like to know from your experience on this subject. How do you view your CFO? What would you like to see?
Humayun Sab, thank you very much. A lot has been said already from my 2 colleagues here. We are a company that is operating since 170 years. Siemens is 170 years old. In Pakistan, we started with our first office in 1922. I have quite a number of years with this organization. And one of the learnings that I took was that, first of all, it depends heavily on the relationship that you have together. The CFO is a business partner of the CEO. There needs to be 100% trust. If the trust is not there, forget it. You will drive the company onto the wall. And you have seen examples where this has happened, and which was a disaster for the organization. So I think the first important thing is build up the trust and make sure that you have trust and you trust each other. Because the moment that you trust each other, you're open. You're transparent. You discuss topics which you can also then disagree upon, which is important to drive the company forward, especially in these times that we are facing now. The second thing within, let's say, the experience that I made is we have a robust system where the culture of the commercial counterpart is ingrained in our day-to-day activities. So
be it sales, be it operations. In other areas, we have a commercial counterpart working very closely together with the technical team. And this is also enabling the commercial organization to embed themselves in the day-to-day operational activities. They get used to the idea of selling to a customer. They don't shy away of going out to meet customers and interact with customers. They look across the area of their own core responsibility and get the knowledge that they need to drive also further, and then later on take over the responsibility of a CEO. I mean, our organization, Joe Kaiser, who is now the CEO, he used to be the CFO. He was very strong. He has a long history with the company. He has been in strategy, in sales, in other different assignments.